Mr Chair.
Councillor Halls.
He didn't get a thousand.
Gosh. Thank you, Mr Chair. I was listening to some very interesting comments on national radio as I came in this morning about President Trump's tweet, the Kowhewhai tweet, and I think that might be the word du jour for 2%. Simply an unfortunate and accidental but tweet of political proportions. I can't express strongly enough my concern about 2%. Not just the simple figure that it is, but what it stands for. This is, pure undisguised politics, if we're honest. And I don't know if people heard the presentation of about 12 minutes ago, which was that we have a balanced budget at 2.5%, which I will be supporting, Mr Mayor. I would have been very happy with 3.5%, but the work that's gone into producing this budget and working with the compounded savings of the last 6 years, we've managed it. But we can't keep managing at this, and we certainly cannot manage at 2%. And, Mr Chair, I would like to take my speaking turn because I suspect I'll be out of the room for a lot today. Our Deputy Mayor very clearly articulated the growth challenges we face, and thinking of Councillor Filipaina and I and the huge portfolio that we share, including parks, community facilities, libraries, open space, sports facilities, waste reduction, community housing, pest management, biodiversity, environmental partnerships, economic development, stormwater, to name a few. These are the areas where we are facing huge challenges. And put quite simply, this budget holds the holding pen for this, but going forward, we will go backwards. We're growing every few years. By a city the size of Tauranga, we are chronically under provision for open space, for sports facilities. Our community are telling us that we're losing the battle environmentally with pests and biodiversity, and our old-fashioned approach in many areas to stormwater continues to pollute our harbours. We just can't keep doing this. So to be fit for the future, we have to go forward, and that means actually acknowledging that the responsibility of being an Aucklander and owning property in Auckland comes with paying the right amount of rates. Our rates are actually a lot cheaper than around the country, so let's face up to that. You don't own property in Auckland and not do your bit if you're a genuine Aucklander, and that's all we're asking, is for people to face up to the facts and pay enough to keep the city going. So, Mr Chair, I certainly will not be supporting 2% because of everything it fundamentally stands for. As a city, we have to make a step change, and going into the LTP, I will be helping drive that step change. We need to face up to climate change, we need to face up to our environmental challenges, we need to face up to the most vulnerable in our community who are suffering, and we need to provide facilities for our growing population, and this is not going to be brought about by the 2%ers. Finally, I just want to say that if we are going to make these changes that are required, we have to make those brave changes going to the LTP, and we don't need to start our next round of the LTP with yet another hole in our spending, which we will do by heading down to 2%. I don't know if people have actually looked closely at this one-pager and how you can feel that after 6 years of us being cut to the bone, we can cut another $7 million out of the budgets easily. And Councillor Sayers, this is actually people and services. This isn't a theoretical thing. This is whose jobs will this be? This is what will we stop doing? This is which libraries will we close? And that's the reality of 2%. So, Mr Chair, I don't understand. No, I do understand. There's politics involved, and I'm not being disrespectful to the mover and seconder. I understand why this is there, but I simply say that 2.5 is adequate, but we've got work to do with the LTP. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Halls. Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you, Mr Chairman. And I think we'd all agree that governance is complex and it requires good quality information and judgment. And I want to, in speaking to this today, to say that I am well aware that we are in times where it's not business as usual. I understand the debt to revenue situation. I understand the limitations on borrowing, and probably I've been close enough to know that the gap with ATAP is probably over $10 billion. So I'm not living in an unreal world. But it's why I think some of us, as we have sat around this table for the last few years, have tried to put pressure on giving consideration to the balance sheet and looking to optimise assets, because we've known that this day is coming. I want to talk about some of the generational equity issues, perhaps from the perspective of my constituents that I've come to grips with in recent times. So, if you go back in time, the Legacy Auckland City Council chose, because of the statutory requirements, to move to 100% depreciation. That was really, really hard. That was a huge step change. And it did require a general rate increase in the first year of that term of 10%. There was considerable pain with that. Those constituents of that time thought that that was going to be probably, they could absorb that into their situation. But it was difficult. And this infrastructure crisis that we have, maybe it was felt first in Legacy Auckland City, but this is not new. And despite the best efforts of the council of that time that was putting up rates by 10% to go to the government of the day, which the mayor was one of the most senior ministers, they were completely disinterested. They didn't want to know. And I would say that, all that has happened with this infrastructure crisis, it's been like the snowball. It's been coming our way, and it's hitting. So at the time of amalgamation, the residents of Auckland City knew that they'd already dealt with the issue of depreciation, but what they didn't understand, and perhaps there was insufficient due diligence done, is that they would be coming to grips with the responsibilities of the legacy councils that had made no provision for depreciation whatsoever. And what I would say to you, and you would say, oh, well, 0.5%, what does 0.5% mean? And I thought I'd just take it down into a step. A neighbour of mine who lives in Mount Eden on Valley Road, who has been there 47 years, who is retired, who is not in a situation to increase their income, that 0.5% equates to $750. $750. It's not just another cup of tea on a weekly basis. And I just have to look those people in the eye and say, have we done all that we can to ensure that we are not forcing those people out of their homes? And yes, I know that there will be some who are sitting around the table, if they can't bloody afford it, get out. But I don't subscribe to communities growing harmoniously on that basis. I think that we have to be able to go into the long-term funding plan, and I agree with the Deputy Mayor. There are some huge challenges ahead of us, and it won't be, in the minds of some, just nickel and diming around the 7 million. It will be looking at that 10 billion plus. We are going to have to take some hard decisions, but I think that this effort thus far has been a bit clumsy and has not reflected the needs and the aspirations of those that live right through the region, particularly those of the Legacy Auckland City area. So for that reason, I'm supporting the amendment that has been put up by Denise Lee, and I would encourage you to support it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You don't always read everything you know that everything you read in the media is true. So I just want to say some statements. I didn't sign a pledge. People have said I did, but I didn't. I certainly didn't sign the Ratepayer Alliance pledge. They wanted me to, and I met with them. And the reason I didn't sign is because I had two concerns: the effect of the CRL on our budget, and the fact that I actually hadn't seen council's books as a local board chair. So I did meet with the chief coordinator and a spokesperson for the association, and I explained that to them. I did absolutely support the association holding rates down. When the cap came off for Ōrākei, 1 in 3 Ōrākei ratepayers paid between 10 and 40% rates rise in 1 year. So I did absolutely support the association. But what I was happy to do is send them a statement. And my statement to that association was as follows. I'm happy to support the Ratepayers Alliance pledge of holding rates rises to no more than 2% per annum as a tangible commitment to my belief that Council can, without doubt, do more with less. However, I am standing on a platform of listening to and involving locals in my decision-making, so my commitment comes with a proviso that should a higher figure be mooted or further compulsory rates charges added, my community will give me their views before my vote is cast. I have heard from the Ōrākei community, as you've seen all yourselves, the results are in your papers. A 2% was not supported by the majority of my ward. Only 27 supported that, 54% thought that a 2.5% rates rise was about the right level, and 18% thought it should be higher. So 72% thought that 2.5 or higher was the right thing to do. As for savings, we have saved $224 million of enduring annual savings have been achieved since amalgamation. That's a big figure. 224 million of enduring annual savings have been achieved since amalgamation, and we are still doing more. And that's good, and we should do more. But the other point I want to make is when I was a local board chair, I came to the governing body with an unbudgeted ask of $60 million to buy Colin Maiden Park. If the governing body had set a rates rise with no ability to borrow, that couldn't have happened. And I'm not going to take that risk for other local boards or other people to have a one-off thing that we don't know is coming when I've had that benefit. So I can't support the 2%. I certainly can support further savings, and I'll be working towards that, and I'm sure most of you are. But I'm going to stick with what my community have said and go for the 2.5. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. I want to support some of what Councillor Simpson was saying in the fact that, people think we're not saving. The public or some of the public think that we are just spending and spending. But the issue is that we've had departments, and maybe not all councillors could make those workshops, but departments have come to us with fear in their eyes telling us what even 2.5% means to their staff, to their operations, to the fact they're not hiring people, to the fact they're going to have to cut real jobs for the 2.5, to cut programs, to pull things back. People are complaining to us already about, we're right on the level of service that our people expect for Auckland. So to go another step, so we're saving 30 million this year in operational, to go another step when we've been told countless times the last couple of weeks that there is no wriggle room, we cannot do this, and then to also say, and to be honest, before I was on the governing body, I didn't actually realise that it also affects the capital spend. So a lot of people think rates going up is just about inflation and just about staff costs. It actually affects our ability to do real infrastructure spending, 20 million at least if we cut down to 2%, on transport, on stormwater. I mean, just the last couple of months have shown us what we need in things like stormwater and transport. A decrease down to 2% will save the average ratepayer $10 a year. That's 20 cents a week. Yes, $10 a year is, it's a lot of money for some people, but we're talking $10 a year for the average ratepayer. But the fact is we're going to have to cut, almost 30 million from our already strained budgets. And I don't think we can do that. We shouldn't be making an irresponsible decision like that. We know that every time staff come to us, we ask for savings, and it would be, I'm amazed at what they've been able to show us, but they still tell us it's going to be hard. The other thing is that the Mayor got voted in on 2.5. I got voted on the North Shore. I didn't have a pledge. I didn't even put up a figure. I didn't say any figure on rates. I just said, I will look at the budget when I see it. I've never seen it before. As a local board member, you don't get to dig down to where we have. And I can see myself that even at 2.5, it's very, very, very difficult to save that money. And we have few decisions around what we can actually do to raise other funds. The other thing is that if we're talking generational issues, I also think about the future and what we would be doing by cutting 20 million from our capital budget. We have massive issues in the city that we cannot fund, that we need to fund. And if saving $10 an average ratepayer right now is the issue, then I think we're thinking much too small. The other thing is, this will likely lose today, and we will put forward 2.5, and everyone who votes for the 2 will benefit from those of us who have voted for 2.5. You will get the service levels in your areas, because this is a regional body. You will get the projects you want done and that you're asking for. And the other thing is, you'll get the land that we've already bought the last few months. You'll get the fact that some people have stopped land sales of non-strategic assets in their ward. So every single decision we made has a domino effect on other decisions. You might want 2%, you might not want other revenues, but you also can't come up to us or the rest of the body and go, we need this project out in our area, we need this funded in our area, we don't want to close libraries or community centres one day a week. So look around the table when we're getting horrible emails tomorrow and maybe thank us for what's happening and what can stay open in your community while we're getting the hate for not voting for 2%. But we have to work together as a team, so thank you.
Just before I go to Mayor Goff, Matthew, could you just confirm, we have the inflation index or the CPI, but we also have a construction cost price index. Can you tell us what they are both running at? Do you have that at hand?
Not at hand, but we'll run around.
Right. Well, if you could provide that, because my understanding is the construction cost price index is twice at least of what is the inflationary, but we'll get that information because we're trying to build things. Mayor Goff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's well known that I took to the whole of the Auckland electorate a proposal that we should look at a 2.5% rate increase. I didn't pull that figure out of the air. I didn't agree to the demands placed on me by groups like the Ratepayers Alliance, which I thought were very uneven and unfair in their presentation of arguments. But I did do a lot of work with council figures to make sure that this is something we could do without, that's a 2.5% increase, without cutting the level of services we provide, but at the same time encouraging council to pass back to the electorate some of the efficiencies that it was making. I've got to say that 2.5% is a rate decrease on what was proposed under the long-term plan, but for me 2% is a step too far. And officials have made it very clear to all of us that a 2% rate increase would require cuts and would require a reduction in investment and infrastructure, and I'm not prepared to do that. We have partly able to reduce rates this year to 2.5% because inflation is lower and because interest rates are lower. That situation will not prevail, and in a short period of time perhaps the interest rates will go up, inflation will go up, and the more we've cut the rates, the more we will have to put rates up at the other end. I think you've got to go for a balanced approach. I also want to make clear that our city is growing by 45,000 people. That means the demand for extra services. And most particularly, it creates the demand in areas like housing and resource consents. We are taking on more staff in those areas, and there's nobody around this table that say we shouldn't be. But if we look at our overall staffing levels for council, you'll see on a per capita basis we are becoming more efficient and our per capita staffing is actually going down. The next point I want to make is this, that when we can save money for the ratepayers, such as we would do in the targeted rate on accommodation, the answer is not simply to put that into rate cuts, it's to invest more in infrastructure, because everybody around this table knows also that if we don't invest in infrastructure, the city will grind to a halt. So I am saying to council, find me more efficiencies, find me more value for money, but not simply to keep cutting back to the bone the rate increases, but rather to invest in what we as a city needs. I think 2.5% is the right balance, and that is why I'll be voting against this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Filipayan.
Sorry, I just had my chocolate fix. Sorry, Chair.
Would you like us to come back to you, Councillor?
No, look, I'll start now that I had my chocolate fix. Chair, I mean, if the people who are going to vote for that 2% is going to vote for cut services to levels, and I mean, good on you. I said this particular comment at the 2015 long-term plan discussion. As the councillors around here don't want to make the hard decisions, good on you. Don't make them then. Let us make the hard decisions for you and for Auckland. Because that's exactly what we'll be doing. We'll be making those hard decisions because you're not prepared to make them. Councillor Sayers started saying, look, you know, this is what I ended up going out to my community. Well, guess what happened when there was some property, and I won't mention where the property was, but it didn't fit the policy, but it's going to cost just under 2 million. What was it? Oh, yes, this is what we need. Please do it. Come back to the community. Where was 2% is what I'm going to do to my ratepayers then? Nowhere. Even the people that voted for it, nowhere at all. When it suits councillors around this table to increase and get more money, even against policy, you will end up doing it. Because that's exactly what you want to end up doing. Is that you're looking after yourselves and not looking after the rest of Tamaki Makaurau. So if you don't want to make the hard decisions, we will make it on your behalf. And Councillor Hills, I just want to sort of support what you said in the last, your closing comment around the emails that we will be getting. I have no doubt through this whole annual plan process, we will be getting some hate emails. Best thing is I know how to delete them without even looking at them. So, you know, they can send all they want. But we are prepared to make the hard calls. 3.5, I just want to support what Councillor Hull said. 3.5, and you're right, Councillor Newman came over, we had a chat around the 3.5, and I said, Daniel, for us, I think, you know, let's have a look at the 2.5. I mean, the worship, you know, your worship, you went out on 2.5, but that was your call, and you couldn't hold that to us. Yep. But based on all the information and work that has been done by our staff, I will be supporting 2.5. But we need to have an honest talk amongst ourselves leading into 1828 long-term plan. Because 2.5, we just can't survive on that if we are going to return to our community what they have asked over the last 6 years. They have asked for a heck of a lot of things, but they're not prepared to say, oh, but, you know, I got no problems increasing my rates. No, but they want a heck of a lot. So we need to have an honest talk with ourselves after the annual plan process. And, you know, I will not be going to 2% because I know what the effect it will have. And, Chair, last week we ended up having our CCOs come in. And there was just one bullet point that really got me when RFA came in. That wasn't confidential, because I don't want to say anything that was confidential. Not allowed to? No, that was an open agenda? Okay, so I won't say anything that's confidential. But when it had the bullet point there saying deferring appointment of vacancies, it put the pressure on the current staff that are there. And that's wrong. That is so wrong. And I mean, so for me, 2%, you know, you're just looking after yourselves. We will make the hard decisions for you, so I will be voting against 2% and for 2.5. Thank you. After my chocolate fix.
Right, I have Councillor Watson, Casey, Councillor Mike Lee, Member Kaka, and Councillor Collins.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to speak to this amendment, but it seems to have morphed into a general debate on the rate. I seem to recall not so long ago, it just seems like yesterday, when the likes of some of the former councillors, like Councillor Brewer, there's a blast from the past, who used to fairly consistently question the level of debt that council was in and cost savings and all the rest of it. And he and anyone else who chose to bring it up were kind of constantly beaten back by the assurance that, you know, we had a AA rating and everything was under control and fine. There was certainly no need to concern. What does concern me is the speed with which we've gone from that fairly common rebuttal to anyone questioning things to, you know, being on the brink of crisis where, you know, 0.5% is going to make or break the Auckland Council. Now, I have sympathies for both sides. I certainly respect the Mayor for the strong leadership he's shown over 2.5%. And he's quite rightly commented before that Aucklanders have made it very clear that they're not willing to stomach any more rate increases such as we had in the previous term of council, and that if there are sacrifices to be made, they prefer to do it via the way of user pays between, you know, perhaps regional fuel tax and other mechanisms for ensuring that there's a closer correlation between who gets a service and who pays for it. And that's absolutely right. That's undeniable. But what is also undeniable are the points that some of my rather beleaguered colleagues have also made with respect of the last 3 years as it goes to how much people have paid in rates, and some pretty dramatic rate increases that took place during that rationalisation, which was fair, which was a fair thing to do, but nonetheless people paid big rate increases in a very short space of time. It was compounded by other additional rates, i.e. the transport levy, which, you know, roughly equated to about 4%. So that also combined with the notion that the council perhaps wasn't quite as prudent with some of its spending as it could have been. So the people that are bringing up the 2%, they're more entitled to do that, because the backdrop of the last 3 years led to a very uncomfortable period of time at the hustlings on the election for any number of people that are back here trying to justify what happened, and it was very hard to do that. We've been told a lot of things of what the council has to face up to now. Well, you know, one of the other things that would be nice would be facing up to the government, because they're the kind of missing body in all of this. So once again, it's taking pot shots at some of the councillors who are trying to hold a bit of a line. No mention again of the government. No, the ones who are really behind a lot of the ills of Auckland and the position we find ourselves in. So I object, while at the same time I'm admiring of the line the Mayor has made, because I think he's made every effort to bring it back 1% to 2.5%. But I'm certainly not going to start throwing bombs at some of the other people who have tried to take it back a little bit further, in line with what they hear from their communities. That's part of their job. So, you know, the white feathers and the, you know, the notions of the people who vote this way, you know, not being as heroic as some of the other people around the table, well, that doesn't really cut it with me, especially in light of the rather quick and dramatic disaster scenario that just rolled out since the start of this council. The speed of that's a little disconcerting, I have to say. I do acknowledge that the message from the community was pretty clear too. That was very clear. I know in my own ward, which is surprising, there was 80% of people who were going for 2.5 or above. So that was a very clear message. But I just wanted to finish, Mr. Chair, by saying that I don't like the way that people are trying to make a little bit of a stand here. Over 0.5% are being subject to a degree of vitriol that I think's not a true reflection of the Auckland community as a whole.